In the Middle Ages, the way that a book survived was if they copied it. Now that seems fairly obvious, but of course there's a certain element of luck in what survived from antiquity and what survived from the Middle Ages. But about the Jewish Middle Ages, it seems that when there was a book that a lot of people were interested in reading, then people would sit and they would make copies of it, and the book would survive. And when there was a book that not very many people were interested in reading, presumably fewer people bothered to make copies of the book, and it was less likely that a book would survive. Sadly, Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, a commentary that I personally admire a lot and have a lot of interest in, fell in the category of books that almost didn't survive into modern times, and probably because very few people bothered to make copies of it. We have hundreds of copies of medieval manuscripts of Rashi's commentary on the Torah, and we have right now a grand total of 0 copies of manuscripts of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah from medieval times. I'll say a little more about that, just for those who would like some of the background. Everyone knows that Rashi lived from 1040 to 1105. I always heard the story about the yeshiva boy who, when he learned that Rashi lived from 1040 to 1105, he said, "It's amazing what Rashi accomplished in 25 minutes." And if that helps you, Professor Berger, did I learn that joke from you or from someone else? I can't. Pardon me? Oh. Yes, okay, so it was. I thought I might have learned it from my professor, David Berger, and no, we say it B'Shem Omro, Professor Berger's brother-in-law, Professor Schatz, who actually had a student who did say that. Rashbam was his grandson, who lived from approximately 1080 to approximately 1165. We don't have precise dates for him. They both wrote commentaries on the Torah. As I said, we have hundreds of manuscripts of Rashi's commentary on the Torah, and we have a grand total of no full manuscripts of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah. Rashi's commentary on the Torah was an instant success. Perhaps even in Rashi's lifetime, but certainly right after Rashi's lifetime, it took over most of the Jewish world and eventually all of the Jewish world. In the years immediately after Rashbam, a number of people quote his commentary on the Torah. You see quotations of it in Chizkuni's commentary on the Torah, in Bechor Shor's commentary on the Torah, and a few other commentaries on the Torah. But what's amazing to me is the number of Bible commentaries who wrote commentaries very soon after Rashbam wrote his commentary on the Torah, who didn't quote Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, and it seems pretty certain that they never saw Rashbam's commentary on the Torah. Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, just a few years after Rashbam, shows no evidence of ever having seen Rashbam's commentary on the Torah. Ramban, in the next century, quotes Rashbam's commentary on the Gemara frequently and is interested in Rashbam's work, but again shows there's no evidence of him ever having seen Rashbam's commentary on the Torah. And we go through a number of the great commentators who came after this, Abarbanel, Ovadia Sforno, no mention of the existence of a commentary on the Torah by Rashbam. That Rashbam clearly did not have a good agent for handling the distribution, and the commentary would have, I think, totally gone into oblivion were it not for a rich Jewish bibliophile named Rabbi David Oppenheim, who lived at the end of the 17th century, who a friend of his told him one day that there's an attic that has a bunch of manuscripts in it. You want to come and look at these old manuscripts? And he picked up one of the manuscripts, and he writes that he noticed that, that the manuscript was eaten by rodents in the beginning and at the end, which is the reason why the manuscript is missing the beginning of this. This was the manuscript of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah that was found by Rabbi David Oppenheim, and that was missing the beginning of the commentary on Bereshit up to chapter 18. It began only with chapter 18, with Parshat Vayera, and it was also missing a little bit at the end of the manuscript. Rabbi Oppenheim loved this treasure, and he used to show it off to a lot of friends of his until finally one of his friends convinced him that he should publish it, and he published it, and that was the first edition of the first printed edition of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, printed in the beginning of the 18th century. All editions that have been published since then have been based on this one manuscript, which was passed on from hand to hand. A number of famous Jews in the 18th and 19th century owned or had possession of this manuscript for a while. The manuscript ended up in a library in Germany and was lost during World War II. Some people like me hope against hope that maybe the manuscript was looted and it will show up one day, but it seems pretty likely that if nobody has heard of this manuscript since the 1940s, that it is gone. When Rashbam's commentary on the Torah was published, it had rather limited interest. There was one super commentator who wrote a commentary on Rashbam wrote a super commentary, a commentary on the commentary of Rashbam in the 18th century. And in the introduction, he writes, he said, "I hear people asking, why should one bother reading this Torah commentary? What good does it do? What can one learn from this?" And the author of this super commentary tries to say that maybe there is something to be learned from this Torah commentary. In the 19th century, Abraham Geiger, who was one of the founders of Reform Judaism, but was also a great scholar of Judaism, who wrote extremely useful scholarly works on Jewish history and Jewish scholarship, found and published a manuscript of Rashbam's commentary on the first chapter of Bereshit up to halfway through the last verse of chapter 1 of Bereshit. He found a manuscript, and he argued, and this argument has been accepted in the scholarly world. I'm convinced of the argument that the manuscript that he found is a manuscript of Rashbam's commentary on almost the entire first chapter of Bereshit. Stylistically and content-wise, Rashbam often makes cross-references in his commentary. It just sounds like the rest of the commentary. There's a very strong case for this. In some religious Jewish circles, there was opposition to seeing this manuscript as being Rashbam's, and particularly because of the comment that we're going to be looking at right now, which is Rashbam's comment on the phrase Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker. And so you can still find some Mikraot Gedolot, some compendia of Bible commentaries that include Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, do not have the commentary on Bereshit, Perek Aleph, on the first Perek of Bereshit. The ones that are published in academic circles and in modern Orthodox circles always do have this commentary. Recently, as Mark Shapiro pointed out in a blog post, Mark Shapiro, I think, reads every book perhaps before it comes out, but immediately upon the publication of ArtScroll has begun publishing a translation of the Mikraot Gedolot into English. And in the first volume, in the first chapter of Breshit. They include all of Rashbam's commentary that was found in this manuscript that Abraham Geiger found and labeled Rashbam's commentary, except they left out the comment on Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, which led Mark Shapiro to say, as we say in this country, Osha, Osha. You don't want, either that manuscript is Rashbam's commentary legitimately, or it isn't. So, with all of this, these preliminary remarks, now let's look at the controversial comment that Rashbam wrote on Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker. Just maybe one last word of introduction for those who don't know very much about Rashbam. I should just say he was a sincerely pious and religious man, a rabbi who spent almost all of his life dealing with Gemara and Halacha. And I figure that he, like Rashi, of course they had a serious interest in Tanakh also, but it was secondary to their interest in Gemara and in Halacha. And Rashbam was in no way, shape, or form a reformer when it came to Halacha. In fact, if anything, he was the strict constructionist who opposed many of the innovations of his younger brother, Rabbeinu Tam, who was the creative halachist, who was coming up with new ways of reading texts, and texts of the Gemara in ways that would be more fitting for the situation that the Jews found themselves in medieval countries. And Rashbam was the one who was saying, here's what the text says, here's what we do. And it's possible that he does the same thing, really, with the Torah, also saying, here's what the text says, and I'm just going to tell you what the text says. Not here's what we do, because Rashbam makes it extremely clear that Judaism that we practice is to be based on the midrashic understanding of the text. He says this a number of times in his work. However, there is still the pshat, and you take a look at what the pshat has to say. Okay, so we all know the verses in the beginning of Bereshit. Is it okay with people if I read the text in Hebrew and you have the English there beside? And those of you who are having trouble with the Hebrew will just look at the translation on your own. Okay, so the verses, the well-known verses that come right almost to the beginning of the Torah. Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or, Vayar Elohim et Haor Kitzov, Vayavdel Elohim bein Haor ubein Hachoshech, Vayikra Elohim laOr Yom, v'lachoshech Kara Laila, Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, Yom Echad. Whenever we went to kindergarten or first grade or wherever, we were taught, what does Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, Yom Echad mean? What do we learn from this? We learn that the Jewish day begins in the evening and goes until the next evening. And I'm sure that when Rashbam went to school, he was also taught that that's what the verse meant. But, he was a creative person who had great skills of text reading and sometimes thought out of the box. And he said that that's not what the verse means. And he writes here, Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, Ein Kativ Kan Vayihi Laila Vayihi Yom. It doesn't say, and there was night, and there was day, and that constituted one day. It says evening and morning. So what does that mean? Ella, Vayihi Erev, She'eriv Yom Rishon V'shika Ha'or. He's talking to us, pardon me for saying so, as if we're idiots, and he's walking us through these words slowly to get us to read them in a new way, which is like the simplest way of reading them, he says. Vayihi Erev, what does that mean? It means there was light, and the light went away. That's what evening is, when the light goes away. Shika Ha'or. Vayihi Boker, Bokro Shel Laila. The phrase Bokrosh Laila comes from the Gemara Zvachim. If anybody's doing Daf Yomi now, they may have bumped into it in the last week or two. But what does Boker mean? Sha'ala Amud HaShachar. That means day broke. So it says, God created things, and then there was evening, and then there was morning. What does morning mean? Daybreak. Harei hushlam yom echad min hashisha yamim she'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'aseret hadibrot v'achar kach yitchil yom sheni vayomer Elohim yehi rakia. When day broke, that was the end of day one. And at that point, day two began. And why? Rashbam makes it clear even before this in his commentary to Bereshit Perek Aleph that he feels that the whole purpose of Bereshit Perek Aleph is to get us ready for the mitzvah of Shabbat that's going to be coming up in the Aseret HaDibrot, that it's going to say there, Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim v'et haaretz. God said in the Aseret HaDibrot, he said, Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem, that God created the world in 6 days. And so the Torah felt that before we see that as a quotation, the narrator should tell us that that is what happened. And so, but the days, the definition of a day, according to Rashbam, is a unit that finishes in the morning. Achar kach yitchil yom sheni vayomer Elohim yehi rakia. So it isn't that, the way we sometimes read this phrase, Vayhi erev vayivoker yom echad, out of its context and just say it means there's nighttime and then there's day and that constitutes one day. Rashbam says no. In each of the days of the creation, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, lahavdil, like us, created during daylight hours, and then there was evening, and then day broke, the light broke of and that was the beginning of the next day. That just like we stop working when the evening comes along, then and we go back to work when light comes out the next day. That's what the Kadosh Baruch Hu did also. V'lo ba hakatuv lomar sha'erev ha'boker yom echad hem ki lo hutzrachnu lefaresh ela hayach hayu shisha yamim sheivkir yom v'nigmar halayla harei nigmar yom echad v'yitchil yom sheni. The only purpose of this is to tell us that in the 6 days of creation, the day begins in the morning. Just in case there's anybody who has any doubt, there's no doubt that Rashbam observed Shabbat from Friday evening until Saturday night. There's no doubt that when Rashbam wrote a date on a ketubah, if he was a Mesader Kiddushin on a wedding that was taking place on Wednesday after it got dark outside, he'd write B'chamishi b'Shabbat in the ketubah. There's no doubt about this. But just in the reading of the first chapter of Bereshit, the meaning of the text is that the days end in the morning. Yeah? I used to argue to my students that actually all of us psychologically agree with Rashbam. We all think that the day begins in the morning. If at 9 o'clock tonight somebody asks you, what day of the week is it today? I'm sure that like everybody in this room would say Thursday, even though if you go to a wedding tonight, it'll say in the ketubah, b'shishi b'shabbat, but all of us will continue to call it Thursday. And even though the laws of Israel, just like the laws of Canada and the United States, say that the official next day will begin at midnight, if any of us are awake at midnight midnight tonight and somebody asks us what the day is, we'll still think that it's Thursday. And when I used to teach this text 30 or 40 years ago in Chutz La'aretz, I used to bring proof from the most popular selling, the highest selling weekly magazine in North America from 30 or 40 years ago. Does anybody know what the... No. Not People. No. TV Guide, very good. TV Guide was, talk about things that have just fallen off the face of the earth. But TV Guide used to be the most popular, the highest selling weekly publication. And there you know that the listings on the television until 6 o'clock on Friday morning will be listed under Thursday. If you're up at 2 o'clock in the morning, then you look under Thursday. So we all believe that that is the case. And Rashbam says that that is what the Torah is saying was going on during Maaseh Bereshit. Just for those of you who have any doubt about my claim that Rashbam accepts the idea of Shabbat, in the continuation of this, the idea of Shabbat beginning on Friday night and lasting until Saturday nights, he says it explicitly in the continuation of his commentary on the same chapter. You see on verse 14, Vayomer Elohim yehi mo'orot birki hashamayim lavdil ben hayom uben halayla vayu lo'otot u'lemoadim u'leyamim v'shanim. On that, Rashbam says, u'leyamim. We use the sun and the moon and the stars to establish what a day is. Shaharei mitzeit hakochavim ad tzeit hakochavim yom echad. So he knows, he accepts the fact that a halachic day goes from tzeit hakochavim until tzeit hakochavim, and that's why the Torah says that God created the stars, and they are to teach us to tell when a day is beginning and when a day is ending. And perhaps just before I go on to Ibn Ezra, I will just mention there's a wonderful website put together by Hillel Novetzki, a scholar who lives in Jerusalem, called alhatorah.org, ALHATORAH. And one of the things Hillel Novetzki is doing in this site is trying to put together the lost sections of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah. And he's also writing a doctoral dissertation in which he is trying to reconstruct the lost sections of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, beginning with a comment on the last verse in Perek Aleph of Bereshit that got cut off in the manuscript that was found by Geiger. And in Novetzki's reconstruction of what it says, he says that he interprets Rashbam as saying that, as I said before, God created in each of the 6 days of creation, and then there was evening, and there was morning. When you get to the 6th day, again, God created during daylight hours, and then, like on all the other days, he didn't do creative activity in the evening, and that's why Shabbat begins in the evening, because by then, we're emulating God, and God actually stopped working at the end of the daylight hours on Friday. Okay, so that's Hillel Novetzki's attempt to reconcile Rashbam with common Jewish practice. Of course, again, to emphasize, Rashbam was an expert in common Jewish practice himself, and he didn't feel the necessity of reconciling it himself. He just said, what does it mean here? Here the text means that that days of creation finished in the morning and not in the evening. Okay, so that's Rashbam's commentary on Vayhi Erev Vayhi Boker, which is a comment about which there is a certain amount of controversy and is not found in, as I said before, in Haredi editions of Mikraot Gedolot, and it was also left out of the latest Art Scroll translation of the Mikraot Gedolot. And now we'll move on to a different text about which there is also controversy. Abraham Ibn Ezra's Igeret HaShabbat. Abraham Ibn Ezra was, Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra was born in Spain, traveled eastward as far as Eretz Yisrael and as far as India, he writes, and then he traveled westward, and he was like the Marco Polo of the medieval Jewish world, he wrote most of his books in Italy and some of them in France. And then he also, according to most scholars, wrote this work called Igeret Shabbat. Again, here there is some controversy. Beginning a few centuries ago, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chida, claimed Ibn Ezra could never have written this book, Igeret Shabbat. And there is still argument in some religious circles and in some scholarly circles about whether this is actually a work of Ibn Ezra. In the beginning, he says, I, Abraham, Ibn Ezra, the Spaniard, he identifies himself as Ibn Ezra. So I've always felt that the burden of proof on those who wish to argue that this isn't Ibn Ezra is on those who wish to argue that the author here is a liar when he calls himself Abraham Ibn Ezra. And I guess for me, one of the strongest arguments, I'll mention some more as we go along, but one of the strongest arguments is that the world's expert on Ibn Ezra, in my assessment, is Professor Uriel Simon, and he is convinced that Ibn Ezra is the author of Igeret Shabbat. It's a fascinating text, as we shall soon. Vahi bishnat arbat alafim u'tshameot u'tshasrei shana b'chatzi halayla. So it was midnight on Friday night in 1159. And in my assessment and the assessment of a number of other scholars, Rashbam's commentary on the Torah was written sometime between 1140 and 1145. Ibn Ezra was younger than Rashbam by about 15 years. As I said before, we don't know precisely when Rashbam was born. Ibn Ezra was born in 1097, so he was younger by about 15 years. At one point in their lives, they both lived in northern France, and is there a possibility that they actually met each other? It's always possible. We know that Ibn Ezra had correspondence with Rashbam's younger brother, Rabbeinu Tam, but there is no evidence that I consider reasonable evidence of contact between Ibn Ezra and Rashbam. Anyways, so Ibn Ezra is writing here that it's in the middle of the night, Beleil Shabbat Ba'arba'asar L'chodesh Tevet. It was on the 14th of Tevet. This will become significant because the moon will play a role later in this text. And so we now know that there is a full moon because it's the 14th of Tevet. Vani Avraham Sfaradi ben Ezra Hayiti Be'ir Achad Me'arei Ha'i Hanikra Ketzei Ha'aretz. It was one of the cities of the island that is called the corner of the world. Anybody know what the island that is called the corner? England, very good. Angleterre, England. And according to this and a number of other sources that we have, Ibn Ezra lived the last years of his life. I said that after traveling east, he traveled west. He came to Italy, he came to northern France, and then he lived the last years of his life in England, in the corner of the world. Vani hayiti yashen, ushnati arvali. Ve'ere b'chalom v'nei omid lenegdi k'marei gever u'v'yado igeret chatuma v'yan v'yomer elai kach zot ha'igeret sheshalcha elecha ha'shabbat. I was pleasantly sleeping, and then I saw that there was a man standing there holding a letter, and he said, Shabbat has sent you a letter. You've got mail. Va'ekod va'eshtachaveh Lashem. And so you don't get a letter from Shabbat every day. Va'ekod va'eshtachaveh Lashem va'varech et Hashem asher netana lanu asher kibdani zeh hakavod. God gave us Shabbat, and now He's giving me a letter written by Shabbat. Vayat pesena b'shtei yadai v'yadai natfu mor. Va'ekraena v'tehi bereshit b'fi kidvash lamatok. There's a verse from Yechezkel where Yechezkel is given an igeret, where he's given a Megillah to read, and God asks Yechezkel to eat this Megillah, and he says how sweet it was when he ate it. And so I was so delighted was sweet to me. Ach bekori haturim ha'achronim cham libi bekirbi v'chimat tetzei nafshi. But when I read the continuation, I got very upset. Again, I'm sure all of you can tell that there are verses worked into almost every phrase here, the common style in medieval writing and even in early modern writing. V'chimat tetzei nafshi. I almost died because I was just so shocked by reading the end of the letter that was sent to me. Va'eshal et ha'omed lenegdi ma pishi ma chatati. So I asked the shaliach who brought me this letter, what had I done wrong? Ki mehayom sheyadati Hashem hanichbad asher bera'anu velamadti mitzvotav la'olam ahavti et haShabbat uveterem bo'a hayiti yotze likrata b'chol lev gam hayiti b'tzeita meshaleach ota b'simcha uv'shirim. This verse about Lavan sending off Yaakov. Umi b'chol avadeha kamoni ne'eman umadua shalcha elai zot ha'igeret. Why is Shabbat sending me this this igeret that chastises me when nobody's been more loyal to Shabbat than I have? Vaya'an vayomer elai tzir haShabbat. Haged hu gad la et asher heviu talmidecha etmol el beitcha sfarim perushe haTorah v'sham katuv lechalel et leil haShabbat. Your students brought a new Torah commentary into your house. And in that Torah commentary, there's a comment that implies that Shabbat should not be kept on Friday night. Va'ata te'ezor modnecha, gird your loins, ba'avur kavod ha'Shabbat li'lachem milchemet ha'Torah im oivei ha'Shabbat. So it's your job, Ibn Ezra, to be the defender of the faith and to argue against this dangerous commentary on the Torah. V'lo tisa pnei ish. Show deference to no man. It's my translation here of V'lo tisa pnei ish. What does this imply to you? What does the phrase Lo tisa pnei ish imply to you about the author of this commentary that Ibn Ezra's students brought into his home? That it's somebody important. That somebody who you might think to show deference to, but despite the fact that this is somebody important, you should show no deference to this person. The verse in Devarim that describes God, Asher lo yisaf fanim v'lo yikach shochat, that he shows no favoritism. And so don't show favoritism to this person. The reason that I emphasize this is that way back in the 19th century, there was a scholar who made a fascinating discovery that sometime around the same period in history, there was in Cyprus a heretical Jewish group called the Meshawites. How many people here have heard of the Meshawites before? I'm sure not very many, and I had never heard of them until I started studying this issue and seeing that Samuel Poznansky had written an article and argued that there is evidence that the Meshawites used to observe the Shabbat from morning till morning, and not from evening to evening. And Poznansky suggested that that is the group against which Ibn Ezra is arguing in this text. I think it's an extremely weak explanation. First of all, there's no evidence that Ibn Ezra ever knew anything about the Meshawites, and there was no reason to think that the Meshawites had produced a Torah commentary that had made its way all the way to England. We have no evidence of the Meshawites producing any Torah commentaries, and it is unlikely that Ibn Ezra, that there would be a hava amina, that it would cross Ibn Ezra's mind to show deference to the Meshawites. And so it seems likely, it seems much more likely, and we'll also see from the continuation, that Ibn Ezra has come into contact with a Torah commentary that was written by somebody to whom he might consider showing deference, and that could easily be the great rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, one of the Baalei HaTosafot, who wrote this controversial comment in his Torah commentary. I continue. 9. Va'ikatz. ותתפעם רוחי עלי ונפשי נבהלה מאוד ואקום וחמתי בערה בי ואלבש בגדי וארחץ ידי ואוציא חוצה הספרים לאור הלבנה. So I was so agitated and I was angry and I got out of bed and I got dressed, washed my hands, and I took the books out into the moonlight to see what was written there. V'nei sham katuv perush vayhi erev vayhi boker. V'hu omer, the commentator here said about the words vayhi erev vayhi boker, ki kasher haya boker yom sheni az Allah yom echad shalem ki alayla holech achar hayom. This language here is extremely similar to the language that we saw on the first page. Certainly it's the precise same explanation as one finds in Rashbam's Torah commentary in similar language, that a day was completed, az Allah, that at that point was completed the first day. The first day finished in the morning. Ibn Ezra's reaction, V'chimat kat karati begadai. I almost tore my clothes. V'gam karati zeha perush. Tearing clothes presumably is a sign of having been exposed to heresy, to heretical writing, and so tear your clothes. V'gam karati zeha perush. And I almost tore up that Torah commentary. Ki amarti tov lechalel Shabbat achad. Even though I know you're not allowed to tear up a book on Shabbat, but perhaps it would be permissible because of tov lechalel Shabbat achad v'lo yechalalu Yisrael Shabbatot harbeh. Paraphrasing the line in the Gemara that says, one of the explanations given in the Gemara about why pikuach nefesh is allowed on Shabbat is chalel alav Shabbat achad kedei sheyishmor Shabbatot harbeh. We desecrate the Shabbat to save a life of someone who will then be able to observe many Shabbatot. In other words, that the net gain for Shabbat will be more Shmirat Shabbat. And here also I thought that maybe I should do Chilul Shabbat in order to cause there to be more Shmirat Shabbat in the future. Vaz Yechalu Yisrael Shabbatot Harbei Im Yiru Zeha Perush Hara. This bad, this evil comment on the Torah. Gam niyeh, he says, one of my daughters was once present when I was teaching this text, and she said to me, at this point, when we reached this point in the text, she said to me, Ibn Ezra was really a drama queen. And I said, yeah, I think that is true. That's a proper assessment. Gam niyeh kulanu lela'ag v'keles be'enei ha'arelim. Also, this is dangerous because it might cause some Jew to observe Shabbat in a way that is not legitimate according to halacha. Also, we could become a laughingstock in the eyes of the uncircumcised ones. Clearly, the uncircumcised ones are the Christians, and as Ibn Ezra was living now in the Christian world, and Christian celebrations they begin in the morning and not in the previous evening. And presumably Jews and Christians had been discussing this issue with Jews, saying, no, we have to begin our celebrations the evening before, and citing Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker to prove this. So if the Christians hear about this, that we have a Torah commentary that actually supports their understanding of what a day is, then we will be a laughingstock. So that this is also from a polemical perspective, this is a dangerous book to have around. But despite this, etapak ba'avur kavod haShabbat. But anyways, I controlled myself, and I didn't tear up the book on Shabbat. Va'edor neder, but I made a vow. Im eten shnat le'inai. It's an unusual form here, but it's the form that appears in Tehillim and Perek Kuf Lamed Bet Pasuk Daled. For anyone, im eten shnat le'inai achar tzeit yom hakodesh ad echtov igeret aruka leva'er matai reshit yom haTorah laharim michshol u'la'asir pachu mokesh. So I made a neder that I wouldn't go to sleep on Motzei Shabbat, but I'd sit down and I'd write a book that would prove that a Jewish day has to begin in the evening. And now he adds yet another point. Ki kol Yisrael haprushim gam kol hatzadokim imahem yodim ki lo nichtava parashat Bereshit maaseh Hashem b'chol yom rak ba'avur sheyedu shomrei haTorah ech yishmeru haShabbat sheyishbetu ka'asher Shabbat Hashem hanichpad lispor yemei hashavua. Both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, of course, in the 12th century, when Ibn Ezra is writing this, there aren't any Pharisees or any Sadducees anymore. But when he says Pharisees and Sadducees, what does he mean? Karaim and Rabbinites. He refers to the Karaites as being the Tzadokim, the Sadducees. So he's actually making 2 points in this statement. Even the Karaites, who don't accept our traditions of interpretation, they all observe Shabbat from Friday night until Saturday night. They accept the idea that a Jewish day goes from, there is no evidence of any Karaites. I've consulted people who are much greater experts in Karaites than I am, and there is no evidence of the Karaites having a different definition of when the day begins. And furthermore, we all know that the only reason that this story is there, and Rashbam himself writes this in his commentary, that the story in Bereshit Aleph is there to prepare us for the mitzvah of Shabbat that will be coming up in the Aseret HaDibrot. So it just doesn't make any sense that in the story the day should be defined in using a different unit for measuring the day than the one that we were supposed to use in Halacha. Sheyishbetu ka'asher Shabbat Hashem hanichpad lispor yemei hashavua. We're supposed to rest the same way that God rested, according to the count of the days of the week. And if Ibn Ezra has not expressed himself strongly enough yet, he finishes off with even stronger language. V'hama'amin ba'perush hakasher hazeh yinkom Hashem nikmat Shabbat mimenu. Anybody who believes this interpretation, may God avenge the vengeance of Shabbat from that person. V'hakoreh oto b'kol gadol tidbak leshono lechiko. I took a chance here. I read it out loud, and Ibn Ezra says, may his tongue cleave to the roof of his mouth. Gama sofer hakotzev oto b'ferush haTorah zro'o yavosh tivash ve'en yamino chaho tikeh, which may be the reason why Art Scroll decided not to include the comment, because they wanted to avoid the curse here that Ibn Ezra put on anybody who writes this comment in a Torah commentary. And Ibn Ezra also provided us with the Igeret that he received from the Shabbat. And it's amazing that the Shabbat writes in the same poetic style that Ibn Ezra writes in.
That's the style everybody wrote in.
Pardon me?
Every Paitan, every Parshan writes in a similar style in terms of relying on Tanakh.
Right. But in this text coming up right now, though, there's an element of writing that is kind of limited to the Sephardic poetic tradition. A very difficult way of writing poetry that depends on the number of shva'im na'im that you have in the Hebrew. One of the simplest poems of this nature we know as Deror Yikra. De shvana ror yikra, le shvana beinim bad, ve yinsorchem, ke movav. Ibn Ezra's sometimes used, sometimes we call that mishkal donish. Donish is a way of writing with shva'im na'im. What actually Ibn Ezra here uses is more complicated than mishkal donish, and so it's a true feat to write a poem in this way. I didn't bother translating it into English. It's a little difficult to do that, but I'll read through it quickly. I think I have time to read through it quickly. Yes. Ani Shabbat ateret dat yikarim rivi'it ba'aseret advarim. Shabbat is introducing herself. She's the fourth of the Ten Commandments. Uvein Hashem uvein banav ani ot brit olam lechol dorim v'dorim. Uvi chol ma'asav kila Elohim v'chein katuv b'reishit hasfarim. V'lo yarad b'yom Shabbat azayman. There was no man on Shabbat. Laman eyeh mofet ledorim. So that'll be a sign for future generations. Ani oneg lechayim al adama umargoa le'am shochnei kvarim. I'm a pleasant day for those who are alive and also for those who are dead. The Jewish belief that those who are suffering in Gehinom will cease suffering on Shabbat. That they are removed from the fires of Gehinom on Shabbat. Some people have raised the question of would Abraham Ibn Ezra have really bought into that kind of understanding of Gehinom, and it's not a bad question, and that's one of the doubts that have been raised about the attribution to Ibn Ezra. I think from other points of view, it's very strong. Ani chedvat zecharim gam nekevot, both men and women love Shabbat. V'sasim bi zekenim gam na'arim, old people, young people. V'lo yitablu bi ha'avelim, ubi lo yispadu al mot yesharim. There's no avelut, there's no hesped. V'asheket yimtzeu bo eved v'hama v'hagerim asher heim b'sha'arim. Yinuchun kol behemotem biyadish, kesusim kachamorim kashevarim. Slaves get to rest, animals get to rest. V'chol maskil b'yeinohu mekadesh v'gam mafdil chashuvim, or in some manuscripts it reads chashuchim, or chasuchim, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, kenezirim, b'chol yom yimtzeu sharei tzvuna, b'yomin niftechu me'ah sha'arim. This is a point that Ibn Ezra says often in his commentaries, that Shabbat is the day that is a special day where we are able to figure out things that we can't understand on other days. That it's a day for deeper understanding of texts. Mechubad me'asot derech, v'chein mi'metzo chefetz v'daver kol devarim. We don't do our business, we don't do our regular things, we don't talk about regular things on Shabbat. Shemarticha b'chol yamim lema'an shemartani me'od mimei neurim. This is Shabbat speaking in second person to Ibn Ezra. I have protected you all of your life because you have observed me from the time that you were young. This is the famous quotation of Achad ha'am yoter mishi Yisrael shamru et haShabbat, haShabbat shamra et Yisrael. Even more than Jews observed the Sabbath. The Sabbath protected the Jewish people. So Achad ha'am wasn't the first to use this language. We see Ibn Ezra using it here. And then, these are the final lines of the poem that made Ibn Ezra upset. B'zignatcha shigaga nimtze'a b'cha, asher ba'u elei beitcha sefarim. But now, in your old age, he was, how old was he? He was younger than I am right now. He was about 63, 64 years old at this point. In your old age, you've done something wrong because you have now inside your home books, V'sham katuv l'chalel lel shvi'i. And there it says, I guess it implies that the Friday night is not part of Shabbat. Ve'ech techashev v'lo tidor nedarim l'chaber igrot derech emunah u'teshalchem elei kol ha'ivrim. So how can you just sit there on your haunches? You should get up, you should make a neder, and you should write a book. and send it out to all the Jews. And this is the introduction to a work of Ibn Ezra, where he explains, using verses and using his knowledge of astronomy and his knowledge of astrology, that the day actually has to begin in the evening. Okay, so here we have two ways of relating to Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker. Rashbam is comfortable offering a way of interpreting this text that does not go along with tradition, and Ibn Ezra is clearly extremely uncomfortable with this. It seems somewhat ironic. This is not the only example where Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, these almost contemporaries, come down in this way, with Rashbam offering the interpretation that one might say is more edgy, not going along with the standard interpretation, and Ibn Ezra towing the line of tradition. It seems funny when one knows things about the lives of Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, because Rashbam, as I said before, in the beginning, was a great Talmudist who spent most of his time on Gemara and on Halacha. And for Ibn Ezra, that was not the center of his life by any means. Part of the point is that Ibn Ezra spent much of his life defending rabbinic Judaism against the Karaites, and therefore he felt a need to be defending rabbinic understandings of texts, even if the Karaites weren't involved here. But I'd like to argue that there's something more going on here. And it has to do with their understandings of what it means to interpret a biblical text. So Rashbam writes in his commentary on the first verse of the Chumash, Yavinu ha'maskilim ki kol, this is top of page 4, Yavinu ha'maskilim ki kol divrei rabotenu v'darshotehem kenim va'amitiyim. Everyone should know that the words of the rabbis and their midrashic explanations are honest and true. V'ikar ha'halachot v'adrashot yotzim miyitur ha'mikraot o mishinui ha'lashon shenichtav pshuto shel mikra b'lashon shecholim lemod heimenu ikar hadrasha. כמו, אלה תולדות השמיים והארץ בהי ברם, ודרשו חכמים באברהם מאריכות הלשון, שלא היה צריך לכתוב בהי ברם. So, according to Rashbam, the Torah is a text that can be interpreted according to the Pshat, and it can also be interpreted using midrashic using midrashic methodology. There are two different sets of methodology that a commentator should use. One of them will lead the commentator to a pshat understanding of the text, and the other one will lead the commentator to a midrashic understanding of the text. Rashbam makes it clear often in his commentary that the most level of understanding of the text is the midrashic level, because we live our lives as religious Jews based on the midrashic understanding of the text. We don't live our lives as religious Jews based on the pshat. And so we don't have to be concerned when the pshat says something that doesn't jive with what the midrash said, because it's a multivalent text, because it's a text that has more than one level of meaning attached to it. And this is not an innovation of Rashbam to say something of this nature. The idea of shivim panim la Torah, that there are different levels of understanding of the Torah, and they're parallel to each other, and they're going to lead to different understandings of the text, and there's nothing wrong about that according to Rashbam and according to many commentators. Ibn Ezra does not seem to have the same approach to the way in which Bible commentaries work, or the way commentaries in general work. I could try to prove this from many texts in Ibn Ezra, but I'm giving you here on the handout one of them. In the introduction to one of his grammatical works called Yesod Dikduk, he makes fun of people who have ideas about biblical interpretation that Ibn Ezra doesn't like. He refers to some commentator, he doesn't name him, but he says this guy is so proud of himself. Omro, yesh la pasuk asara ta'amim. When he says, this verse has 10 different meanings. Ta'am in Ibn Ezra's language often means meaning. That this commentator that he hasn't named says, I can find 10 different interpretations of this verse. Yithalel benafsho. He's so proud of himself. And his reputation rises because he can offer 10 different interpretations of the same verse. But actually, the opposite is true. When a person offers 10 explanations for a verse, he has no idea which one is the correct interpretation of the verse. And in fact, it's possible that he hasn't even mentioned the correct interpretation when he offered those 10. And here's the crux of what he's saying. Ki kol mechaber sefer, navi haya o chacham, ta'am echad lidvarav. For there is only one correct explanation for the words of any author, whether he be a prophet or a sage. A text has one interpretation. And to say that there are two interpretations for the text is not something that we are allowed to do. It's not something legitimate. That's not what Parshanut is about. And if this were a class about Ibn Ezra's methodology, I'd give further examples of Ibn Ezra's dedication to the idea that a text has only one meaning. And Rashbam lives in a world where multivalent texts, where texts that say more than one thing, are legitimate, fine. That's the way the Torah ought to be read. And so part of the explanation of this conflict between Rashbam and Ibn Ezra boils down to the difference between the ways in which each of them understands what it means to interpret a text. And now, just for the last 7-8 minutes that remain for me in this class, I'd just like to get back to the basic issue of, so when does the day begin? We all know the halachic understanding, and we all know the what I was arguing before is the standard psychological understanding that most people relate to the day as a unit that begins in the morning. And in halacha, we always relate to the day, almost always. For those of the Talmidei Chachamim in the room, some of you will know that in Kodshim, that when it comes to sacrifices, we actually say that halayla holech achar hayom, that halacha says that there is an exception, and that in the rules of sacrifices, the day ends in the morning, but that is seen in the halachic literature generally as being the exception. So, what does the Torah have to say about this? Moshe David Kasuto, in his commentary on Bereshit, writes that Rashbam was the first to realize that Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom Echad means that the day finishes in the morning. And Kasuto goes even farther than Rashbam. And he says, throughout the Bible, there obtains only one system of computing time. The day is considered to begin in the morning. But in regards to the festivals and appointed times, the Torah ordains that they shall be observed also on the night of the preceding day. That actually, Kasuto claims, and he has a long argument there where he goes through many verses in the Bible to try to claim that the Torah's understanding of a day is a unit that begins in the morning. And perhaps to give one clear, even if it's not the most pleasant example, he gives the example from the story of Lot's daughters after the destruction of Sodom when they seduce their father. So it says that one of them slept, the older one slept with her father at night. And then it says, Vayehi mimachorat. But then on the next day, Vatomer habechira elatzira, hein shachafti emesh adavi, nashkenu yayin gam alayla, uvoi shichri imo, unchaye me'avinu zara. He said, it's clear that in the narration of this story, that's the next day is like the morning. That doesn't mean the next night after. That machar. He goes through many examples in the Torah where a machar clearly is a unit that begins in the morning. And now, of course, the crucial thing is that the halachic texts, as you see at the bottom of the halachic texts in the Torah, make it clear that the celebration of Jewish holidays begins in the evening, and it's unequivocal, unambiguous that is the case. Just to read the verses here, Barishon ba'arba'asar yom lachodesh ba'erev tochlu matzot, ad yom ha'echad v'asrim lachodesh ba'erev. So Pesach is to be observed from the 14th, you're supposed to eat matzot from the 14th day in the evening until the 21st day in the evening, as we do in this country. And it says this explicitly also about Yom Kippur. Ach be'asor lachodesh hashvi hazeh yom ha'kippurim hu, Shabbat Shabbaton hu lachem v'initem et nafshotechem, b'tisha lachodesh ba'erev, me'erev ad erev tishbatu Shabbatchem. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall observe your Shabbat. And so it's clear that the Torah is telling us that observances are from evening to evening. However, Cassuto argues that if you look closely at these verses, even these verses tell us that the concept of a day is a unit that finishes in the morning and not in the evening. Think about let's look at the first example. We start eating matzot when? Ba'arba'a asar yom lachodesh ba'erev tochlu matzot. When do we eat matzah for the first time? Pardon me? At the night. And what does the Torah call that? It calls it the 14th day of Nisan. It's still calling it the 14th day of Nisan. And those of you who are students of Gemara will know that in the second example here, like the Gemara asked the question, what's it talking about? B'tisha lachodesh, initemet nafshotechem b'tisha lachodesh. We don't do inui nefesh. We don't fast on the 9th. So why is the Torah saying that there's fasting on the 9th? And Cassuto just says in the Pshat, no, it means you should fast from, this year, Yom Kippur is going to be on Tuesday night and Wednesday, so it means you should start fasting on Tuesday before Shkia on Tuesday. You should start fasting, but they're calling that the beginning of the fast. They're calling it the 9th of the month. They're not going to call it the 10th of the month until the next morning. So the celebrations, the chiyuvim, the obligations. Cassuto argues. The Torah makes it very clear that we are supposed to observe the day as a unit from the evening to evening. However, the concept of a day, Rashbam was the first who directed us towards this understanding of the concept of a day as the Bible seeing the day as beginning and ending in the morning.